This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Representative Connie Wilson, also lobbyist and political analyst, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, and political consultant Brad Crone. It's been an interesting week in North Carolina, and we've got lots to talk about, including the House budget, new Senate proposals for tax reform, and one senator's reaction to Moral Mondays. If there's time, we want to talk about the proposal to lower the blood alcohol content level for driving under the influence. As I say, we've got a lot to talk about. Let's get started. The North Carolina House rejected the Senate version of the budget and this week advanced a $20.6 billion budget proposal. While close to spending the same amount as the Senate, there's some very large differences. The House uses lottery proceeds to fund 5,000 more pre-K slots, doesn't cut as many teachers' aides, and keeps classroom size restrictions. It makes larger cuts to the university system, begins a program for high school students to enroll in community colleges rather than public universities, fully funds the North Carolina Rural Center, gives $50,000 to eugenics victims, and cuts all funding for the Wildlife Resources Commission. I want to ask all the panelists to give the House budget a letter grade and tell us what you like and don't like about it. Chris, we'll start with you.
Well, I think I gave the Senate plan a D, so I'll give the House plan a D+, because I think that they do deserve credit for eugenics compensation. I'm glad they didn't kick pregnant women off of Medicaid. There's some other good things in there. One thing you didn't mention, they put a school voucher program in the budget. When whatever you think of school vouchers, the budget is not the place to put it. We need a full debate on that on the House floor and in the Senate. And it still makes more cuts to education across the board in North Carolina. And I don't believe after 4 years of cutting public schools, community colleges, and universities, we can continue to cut our way to prosperity.
Connie, give it a grade and tell us what you like and don't like.
I would give it a B. And I will tell you, the Republicans will not vote for a tax increase, so they are having to work with the dollars that they've got. And the big bugaboo in the budget is Medicaid. It just keeps growing exponentially, and it's almost impossible to control it. So folks can complain all day long about cutting other items, but until Medicaid can come under control, they're going to have problems. They're working on that. There was mentioned about NC Pre-K and some other funding that was restored from the Senate budget. I would give them a B.
Brad?
Well, it's an RD. It's a real dog. And to talk about Medicaid,
I don't know where that falls.
It's not in your standard elementary grading system. But to talk about Medicaid for a second, you know, this legislature, the first week they were in town, they slapped the governor around and said, not only no, but heck no, we're not going to take any Medicaid expansion money. It's $100 million a year for the next 3 years from the federal government, and you know, you can't come back and say, oh my God, we got problems in Medicaid. Well, you turned down $300 million over the next 3 years in Medicaid money. They have continuously cut the funding levels for education at our elementary school levels. Their budgets are tighter at the community college level, and they are really undermining our university system. And the long-term impact of these cuts and the reductions to the budgets for these institutions is going to be detrimental to the state of North Carolina.
So you didn't give them a grade, but I gather you don't like it. John, give us your grade.
That's okay. My grade's more important. It's a B. Brad, Medicaid expansion has absolutely nothing to do with the state budget. The Medicaid hole is for the current recipients. Medicaid expansion would only pay for new people. It wouldn't help them at all with the Medicaid hole that they have to fill with a 10 or 11% increase.
So let's get back to talking about the budget.
But that's important. Okay. Is the state House budget sets appropriate priorities. I do prefer the Senate budget in the areas of education spending and elsewhere, but I agree with Chris that the House budget does do the eugenics compensation. That's important.
Chris, obviously the House has a different vision for North Carolina and spending priorities than does the Senate. Is it a fair assessment to say the House budget is more moderate to the Senate's more conservative plan?
I don't think so, because I would think that you would call a school voucher program a very conservative plan. I think more cuts to the university is not a moderate position. I think they're different. They cut in different places. And one point we haven't made is that both the House and the Senate set aside money to cut taxes It's not just Medicaid, and we can talk about Medicaid some more if we want to, but it's not, the Senate set aside $770 million over 2 years and then says we don't have enough money to fund public schools adequately. Remember, Governor McCrory believes tax reform ought to be revenue neutral.
All right, Connie, Speaker Tillis says that he still expects the budget to be in place by the beginning of the new fiscal year, July 1st, but the differences are big. Do you think this is really possible?
You know, if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said no. But over the last few days, there is a unified front that you can see with people talking to each other, and a seriousness is that they want to get the budget done by June 30th. So I believe there's probably conversations already going on with budget items. The House tonight, which is Wednesday night, passed on second reading their budget. They'll have it done Thursday morning, and you'll see conferees appointed right away. So it's very possible you're going to see June 30th.
I think you're seeing a whole lot of temper tantrums. You know, earlier this week you saw Rucho just melt down.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Because of he didn't get his way. And I think you're going to see a whole lot of tensions between the Senate leadership and the House leadership, and you could end up with a continuing resolution.
Well, one of the things, John, about this budget is that the House budget doesn't have all the special provisions that the Senate budget had in it. Legislation without votes. It's 100 pages shorter. Does that make it easier to understand?
Well, it does, and it probably makes it easier to make a deal, because if the House had come in with their own set of special provisions different from the Senate, that would have been something else to negotiate on. I think actually it won't be that hard for them to come to an agreement. I don't know that it'll be done by June 30th, but I think if it isn't, it'll be done shortly thereafter.
Chris, there was even some suggestion that perhaps maybe Governor McCrory or a representative of the governor's office might even be in the conference committee as they're negotiating out these differences. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it would certainly make sense for the governor to have somebody, if not in the conference committee, certainly working closely with the committees. In fact, I think it would be startling if he didn't. He's the governor of North Carolina. I think he's been a little bit too quiet. As I mentioned in my comments a moment ago, he said over and over and over, as recently as a week ago, he wants tax reform to be revenue neutral. Neither plan is revenue neutral. It's going to require a lot of cuts. I don't know where what he's going to do about that. I don't know how he feels about vouchers, which I think will be a big bone of contention in the debate.
All right, very quickly, last question. Give me your prediction as to what we're going to see in the budget. Will it be more of a House version of the budget or a Senate version, John?
I think it might be somewhere right in between.
Connie?
I agree.
Chris?
I think the other power play we haven't talked about is House Speaker Tillis running for the U.S. Senate and maybe Phil Berger. I think there's a lot of political undertones. It might be a split, but both of them will be claiming credit.
I think the House budget will prevail.
Well, you can watch NC Spin anytime you want. Just go to our website, ncspin.com, and click on the YouTube button on the right side of the page. We post each week's show on Friday, so view us anytime you like. And while at ncspin.com, be sure to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter, Spin Cycle. 3 ways to keep the conversation going: ncspin.com, NCSpin on Facebook, and Spin Cycle. We look forward to talking and listening to you.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Our farmers are among the most productive in the world, even while lacking a stable and reliable agriculture workforce. But the workforce problems in agriculture have reached a breaking point, and food demand continues to rise. Reforms to the immigration system can ensure that farmers have access to the workers they need. The good news is that we still have time to fix this corrosive problem. Tell your congressional representatives that we need comprehensive immigration reform in 2013.
The North Carolina Medical Society is committed to a healthier North Carolina. We feel, as an organization representing over 14,000 physicians, that we have a responsibility and an obligation to help our citizens become more healthy. And by doing this, we want to help educate them about ways in which they need to keep themselves healthy through good nutrition, exercise, and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. These ingredients will help not only individual citizens become and maintain a healthier outlook on their lives, but also help contribute to having a healthier state.
Resident lenders of North Carolina are licensed providers of safe and responsible financial services. Existing regulations limit consumer choice. It's time to modernize consumer finance laws. Learn more at responsibleloansnc.com.
There's a new day dawning for our state. A fresh crop of leaders are bringing conservative reform. Gone are the days of billion-dollar deficits, and the threat of Obamacare minimized. Now they're working to get our economy on track by holding the line on spending, cutting taxes, passing tax reform that's smart and fair. Let's get back in the game, North Carolina. Encourage our new leaders to keep going.
We now return to NC Spin.
This legislature is nothing if not interesting. Last week we told you the Senate had 2 tax reform proposals it was considering. This week, Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger put a 3rd proposal on the table before his Senate Finance Committee and also before the whole body. One, he said, was more modest and responsive to the negative feedback the so-called Rucho plan had drawn. Brad, help us understand what happened here. The Senate had been much more hard line in a major overhaul of the tax codes. Why the sudden change?
Well, they couldn't get the votes for it probably out of the Senate chamber, even within their caucus. They also probably did a good job of reading the polls, where you had 80% as high, numbers as high as 80, 81%, most likely voters opposing taxing prescription drugs, Social Security, and their groceries. So it was a bad plan to start off with, and they had to scrap it.
Yeah, Chris, Senator Bob Rucho just almost had a meltdown in the Finance Committee as this new bill was being brought out.
He was never going to win Mr. Congeniality, but I think he cemented it this past week by having a meltdown, calling out lobbyists in an open committee room, and first of all, and then saying he was not going to support the Republican leadership Senate plan, basically because it was not his plan. But his plan was doomed from the beginning. And it's an odd choice, I think, for a politician. It makes you wonder a little bit about Senator Rucho's future. But I actually think Senator Berger has a little bit of a black eye here. Remember, it was only a month ago where he unveiled a slick video and a website. He was walking through an empty factory with the tax code under his arm, and it was a Rucho plan, basically. And now there's no new video, but it seems like all the things that were so great about that plan, he's simply forgotten.
Connie, one of the interesting things about the Senate plan is that they are eliminating the 130 items that services that they were going to tax previously, or announced they were going to tax previously, scaled them back dramatically. What caused this about face?
Well, it was definitely the controversy that they were receiving. There's just so many times that people will be paying for those items, and the tax cut that they would be getting, let's say from an income tax, only comes one time a year. In support of Senator Rucho, I will say this. He has really worked so hard pushing this issue. Tax reform is not a popular topic, but it's very important for North Carolina. And it took
And he was being used in a certain way as sort of a lightning rod.
It took his perseverance and his doggedness to keep this out front.
John, one of the things that is being raised is that a lot of people don't think the math quite adds up here. We're going to drastically cut income tax rates, do away with corporate income tax rates, cut personal income tax rates, while at the same time we're also not going to increase sales tax revenues that are coming in.
That's not it. Actually, it increases the sales tax base quite a lot. It just doesn't do it through additional service tax. It does it by capping capping the sales tax refund that nonprofits, mostly hospitals, get. It makes some other changes to the sales tax base. It actually does increase some sales tax in some areas, but it doesn't have the same effect on households. And the Fiscal Research Division came out with its analysis of the distributional effects of the Senate plan, and virtually all households at all income levels and all sizes get at least some tax cut. That's a little bit actually broader than the House plan. That's mostly because the Senate plan has a much larger fiscal impact. If you think about it in long term, the House tax plan that came out, when it's fully implemented, the fiscal impact will represent about 2% of general fund revenue. The Senate plan, the new plan, when fully implemented, will be about 5% of general fund revenue. I don't actually think either of those numbers is particularly shocking, but obviously the Senate number is higher.
And I think we need to be a little bit honest. We were talking about reform. In the old version of reform, we would apply the sales tax to a lot of services and dramatically lower the sales tax rate on everybody so it wouldn't be so regressive. The Rucho plan didn't do that. The Rucho plan left a lot of those sales taxes high. Now what we really have is a tax cut plan. This isn't tax reform. It's going to be, John uses the number 2% and 5%. What that means is $1 billion a year, almost more than $4 billion. This is a major tax cut plan. It's not reform anymore.
Senator Dan Clodfelter, who's been working on this tax reform idea for a long time, he's a Democrat. He says this is a charade, making a lot of promises to people without any way to pay for it.
Well, the key argument is that it's not a good deal for working families and middle-class families. They are going to have a higher tax burden even under the new Senate compromise plan.
All right, I want to go around the table. I want to go around the table one more time.
Yeah, that is correct.
They will all get a tax cut.
You've got a new tax on energy.
They will all get a tax cut.
You've got a
the math
sick
is
tax.
absolutely clear. Every single household will get a tax cut by income, according to the Senate plan. There is not a tax increase for the low and middle income families. It's just not true.
It is.
The energy tax is a tax increase.
You're going to have an energy tax increase, and the hospitals will be passing on the sales tax straight back to their patients.
I want to go around the table. Which version of the tax reform plan that we're currently discussing is likely to prevail, John?
I think that the final bill will end up something in between the House and Senate plans.
Connie?
I think it may end up looking more like the House plan.
Well, the wild card in all this, again, is Governor Pat McCrory, who has yet to show some real leadership on this. If he's serious about it being revenue neutral, not costing us $4 billion, it can't be either plan. I think they'll ultimately be closer to the House plan.
Brad?
It's going to be the House plan.
Well, when we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about Monday Morons.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
We all count on our community hospitals. But what if, due to continued government cuts, our hospitals had to limit their services? What if it took twice as long for your family to reach an emergency room? What if our hospitals could no longer afford to deliver babies? What if our community hospitals simply had to close their doors? We need to make sure our community hospitals and the services we count on do not disappear.
Resident lenders of North Carolina are licensed providers of safe and responsible financial services. Existing regulations limit consumer choice. It's time to modernize consumer finance laws. Learn more at responsibleloansnc.com.
The best part about being a member of a Touchstone Energy Cooperative is that it's your Touchstone Energy Cooperative. Learn more about the power of your co-op membership at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
You trust your family physician to care for you and your family. We treasure that trust and are committed to providing the best care possible for all North Carolinians. It's time for Medicaid reform, but not without input from North Carolina's family physicians. Medicaid reform will impact health care for all of us. Tell state leaders you want your physician involved. We need Medicaid reform that's good for North Carolina. To sign our petition of support, visit rnchealthcare.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
Several weeks ago, we talked about the Moral Mondays demonstration taking place in the Halifax Mall and inside the Legislative Building. The movement continues to grow. This week included 2 demonstrations, particularly one on Monday that included 5 religious leaders throughout the state showing support. They emphasized theirs was not a demonstration of political partisanship, rather a matter of faith with respects to biblical teachings and imperatives to protect the poor, respect the stranger, care for widows and children, and love neighbors. In response, Governor McCrory pledged not to back down, and Wilmington Senator Tom Goolsbee called the events Moron Mondays, a circus complete with clowns, a carnival barker, and sideshow put on by the loony left. John, I'm not sure what Senator Goolsbee was hoping to accomplish, but judging from the reaction, he might have been a catalyst in solidifying support for Moral Mondays. What's your response?
I don't know that it has a big effect one way or the other. Clearly, Senator Goolsbee's language could be characterized charitably as extremely hyperbolic. I will also tell you, though, that the leader of the protests, Reverend William Barber, compared what the Republicans are doing on taxes and other issues to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, which I personally find offensive and was also extreme hyperbole. So I think everybody needs to calm down a little bit. Obviously, there's a spirited debate about education, health care, transportation, taxes, and other issues, but I don't think we need to be calling each other.
Brad, you're a political consultant. Should Tom Goolsbee apologize for what he had to say?
I think he needs to make that decision, but I promise you this, you'll see that language again. Goolsbee's not in necessarily a super safe seat. He's in a competitive district down in Wilmington, and I think unaffiliated and independent voters may find that type language offensive. Tom, I will say this, the Moral Mondays are hitting critical mass. And the problem that it's creating for the Republicans in the General Assembly is that every Tuesday morning in every daily paper across the state, there's a headline about what's going on.
Yeah, Connie, the Republicans are not playing this particularly well, are they?
You know, I guess the way I look at it, it's kind of like the Occupy Wall Street type deal. There's some buzz.
They're throwing fuel on the fire, though.
You know, well, first of all, we're going to be out of session in 2 or 3 weeks anyway. And you go a year out from this time period when the elections occur, and everybody's going to forget about this stuff right now anyway. It's high emotions. There's a lot of frustration. We're going to be done in 2 or 3 weeks, and it's all news.
I think comparing to Occupy Wall Street is not exactly true. When you have mainstream denominational leaders, you have people from all over North Carolina. I thought McCrory also stepped in it a little bit, saying it was outside agitators or outside influences, and then WRAL's Mark Binker did a story, 98% of the people who've been arrested are from North Carolina. Interestingly, Tom Tillis said, these people have a legitimate point of view and have a disagreement. I wish we could figure out a way to talk to them. That's the way a mature politician responds, not calling them stupid names or claiming they're outside agitators. I thought that was very striking.
I agree completely. So why isn't it happening?
Well, I'll tell you something interesting. Senator Jeff Tart, who's a freshman Republican from Mecklenburg County, actually left his office. He's a Republican and went out and started talking to folk. So at least for him, that has occurred.
You talking about this past week?
This past Monday, he went out in the crowd.
If he was there, he was playing it pretty low key, because I went to see for myself what was going on, and I didn't see any conservatives or Republicans.
Well, you probably just missed him. But look,
I probably just missed him. That's right.
I think the best thing to do is that kind of just people have a right to protest, I'm going to go back to work kind of stuff. I don't think making a lot of big deal about it. I wouldn't portray the fact that 98% of the arrestees are from North Carolina as telling you that 98% of the crowd is from North Carolina. I have no idea. It's probably a somewhat higher number than 2% from elsewhere, but who cares? I mean, I just don't think
that's not the issue.
I don't think it matters.
All right, so Brad, is this helping the Democratic cause throughout North Carolina?
No, the Democrats are hurting themselves. Lord, they have a big enough problem down at the Goodwin House already with a chairman that's totally had his legs cut out from underneath him and is involved in scandal after scandal.
Yeah. I do think, though, I think it's worth noting that what this has done, and Brad mentioned it, the headlines in the paper on Tuesday morning, there are a lot of people who don't, there's so many things happening in this session of the General Assembly, so many people aren't aware of it.
Do you think mainstream North Carolina cares how many people get arrested?
No, but I think they know that people are getting arrested and they want to know why, and then they'll think that 70,000 people are going to lose unemployment benefits July 1st. They know that people are not going to get health care, that we're going to have a lot of other legislation. I don't think people voted for all the things the General Assembly is doing. The question is, will they find out about it?
And the other question that we're going to ask after these messages is, should we lower the blood alcohol content? Stay with us.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
We all count on our community hospitals. But what if, due to continued government cuts, our hospitals had to limit their services? What if it took twice as long for your family to reach an emergency room? What if our hospitals could no longer afford to deliver babies? What if our community hospitals simply had to close their doors? We need to make sure our community hospitals and the services we count on do not disappear.
Raffaldini Vineyards is Chianti in the Carolinas. Enjoy Italian-style wines, breathtaking views, cultural events, and much more. Visit raffaldini.com.
It's true. Farming is different than it was 50 years ago. We know consumers have questions about how our food is grown today. North Carolina livestock farmers want you to know that they're using the most responsible and caring farming practices to feed our state.
ncanimalag.com.
The National Transportation Safety Board is proposing rules that would lower the blood alcohol content limit from the current 0.08% to 0.05% in order to avoid crashes and save lives, they say. As might be expected, this suggestion is drawing quite a bit of reaction. Connie, the American Beverage Institute says the average woman has a 0.5% blood alcohol level after one drink. What do you think of this proposal?
Well, I think there's two ways to prohibition. One is to ban the sale of alcohol. Another one is to go this direction. For women, it would be extremely difficult to go out and have a glass of wine after work.
Brad, if this proposal is implemented, what impact is it going to have on restaurants and bars in North Carolina?
Well, it could have a profound impact on the amount of alcohol that you consume. But I think that you got to look at it from a safety standpoint too. You are, even at 0.05, somewhat impaired, maybe not at the level that you are at 8 or at 0.1. The bottom line is that if you drink alcohol, have a designated driver and get somebody to drive you
John,
home.
I know you're a teetotaler, but in reality, is this going to stop anybody? If they pass this, is it going to stop anybody from drinking?
It is entirely reasonable to set limits for people who are driving on public highways. I'm not sure lowering the limit again is reasonable. I think people
got
will
that,
see
but
that.
will they stop?
Will they stop at 0.05?
Will they stop drinking?
Oh. I think it'll be hard to get people to stop taking one drink or two.
And Chris, are they going to enforce the laws we got any better?
Well, and this raises a whole other issue. We don't have time to get into it, but the problem is with habitual drunk drivers as much as it is a casual user who maybe has a glass of wine or two and blows a 0.6 or a 0.5, and we've never really come to grips with the best way to keep those folks off the road.
Well, so far as it goes, if it's a suggestion by the federal government, will North Carolina pass it? Yes or no?
No, unless it's a mandatory, you're going to lose some Fed funding.
I think North Carolina should say no, and they should focus on the habitual offender.
Brad?
I think that they ought to seriously look at it. Drunk driving is a serious issue in the state, and I think if you're going to drink, don't drive.
Chris?
I think there's plenty of time to look into this. We need some more science. We need more information. I think that's too early to make this decision.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, read our weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when we'll take on more issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.